I'm Mr. Holland and I'm here. Mr. Downey.
Here.
Mr. Olds.
Here.
Jason. Mr. Dr. Boland
Here.
and Ms. Zelatel.
Yep, here.
Okay, welcome. So we do have a quorum with is that 5 members. Could you please help us with the public involvement announcement, Aaron?
Yes, AMATS committee meetings are open to the public and the public is provided an opportunity to comment each meetings. Business items are first presented by staff or consultant, then the committee is given an opportunity to discuss the business item. After the committee discusses the business item, the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Do we have an approval of the agenda? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Zelatel, seconded by Dr. Boland. Do we have any changes? Guess maybe I'll mention that we did drop Marathon from the agenda based on their request. They did present to the technical advisory committee conversations at that technical advisory committee over whether or not it was appropriate to have them present, and I think it was. That's a significant facility there. They requested to be able to present, so I thought it was a good idea. They'd presented to the project team a few weeks earlier. I thought it was interesting, so it seemed relevant to me. I guess next time, Aaron, if I suggest something that you think is inappropriate to be on the agenda, let's have that conversation up front.
Sounds good.
Okay. And also, should we mention that starting next month, I think we're going to push this meeting a half an hour? Is that the plan for
We haven't
next year?
discussed that yet because pre-agenda is after these meetings. And so moving the meeting times at this point, we're going to need to do some more discussion with the committee members and outreach like that. So that's why you don't see it on the agenda right now.
Okay.
We had a pretty full agenda. January is very full as well. So we're going to need a little more discussion on staff's end, because if we push it back half an hour, we're going to have to find a different location
Oh, okay.
for the meeting.
Okay. Sounds good. And that was to help you guys. I know that you have a meeting just prior to this. So if we don't need to do that, maybe that's the easiest thing. But that was the purpose of that. We're on to agenda item number 4.
We haven't approved the agenda yet.
Oh, sorry,
We simply
got ahead of
moved it,
myself.
seconded
So, yeah. Anybody object to the approval of the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. On to agenda item number 4, and it looks like we have no action there. Minutes to come at the next meeting, I assume?
Yes,
Yep.
Lori has been busy working. She was out for a little while and we appreciate her patience working with us on that.
Sure. Okay. On to the action items. Item 5A is the AMATS Title VI plan. Do we have a presentation for that?
Yes, it'll actually be Christine Schutte who's the one doing that.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Christine Judy with AMATS. Before you is the updated Title VI plan. Our previous or current plan is from 2012. This plan is fresh structure, updated graphic, demographic analysis, and then revised content for plain language and clarity. This plan will be an appendix of the public participation plan, which is also going to be revised and will be before the committee in February, hoping to release it for public comment. So at that time, the public will get a chance to read the plan and comment on it as well. We're looking for an approval of the plan now so that we can translate it, and that can be part of the public process. And when I talk about translations, that is determined by safe harbor languages. Safe harbor languages are languages that are where at least 1,000 or 5% of the population in question will self identify themselves as speaking English less than very well. And the tables that we look to suggest the languages that we are suggesting for language come from census data table C16001, and that's our county Miss Valerie Bankridge, where we can identify Korean, Spanish, Tagalog, and a category for other Asian Pacific Islander languages that meet the 1,000 persons threshold. If we look at state data, which gives you a few more languages, table B16001, we can suggest that Hmong is one of the other Asian Pacific Islander languages that meets that threshold. And then further looking at ASD enrollment data, we can suggest that Samoan is also part of that other Asian Pacific Islander language that would meet the threshold that we should consider translating important documents, and there's a whole process to decide what is important. And then it's all based on what resources are available for those services. Not on this item, but on the next item, we talked about translations, and TAC moved to also translate into UPIC. For data sets that are available currently, and those two tables, I cannot identify if UPIC would be part of a safe harbor language category. There's a table that they stopped providing back in 2013, where you can see in the municipality of Anchorage, there were 785 individuals that spoke UPIC as a first language. They also self-identified as speaking English less than very well. That table, due to privacy considerations, is not updated anymore. I can look at state data, and then so that area is something that we're still researching, and we're working with municipality equity and justice office so that we can both sync and align our efforts on that.
Do we have any questions for Christine from the committee? So would that be a requirement for to have UPIC as a translation to be over 1,000? If it was still less than 1,000, would we have the ability to include that in the language that it's translated into? Or?
Yeah, we can. Right now, AMATS's policies, any request that comes in through resources, we can translate any materials into whatever languages. But as far as doing the official Title VI analyses, that's based on safe harbor languages. So if it would be the policy, here are the languages that are part of safe harbor, and then here are the languages that the committee is recommending we also translate.
Okay.
My understanding is that the safe harbor is more like a floor than a ceiling. Like, we must provide language for the access for the safe harbor languages, but we can go above and beyond to provide more access.
Yeah.
And I asked Christine and Aaron to coordinate with Kim Waller to figure out, make sure AMATS and the municipality are aligning in terms of how we're translating, particularly for Alaska Native languages.
Do we have any comments from the public? Not seeing any. What is the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Move to approve by Ms. Zeltel, seconded by Dr. Boland. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none. Item 5A, Title VI plan is approved. On to action item 5B, the AMATS household travel summary. So we have a presentation for this as well.
I'll do a quick introduction, and then I think we have resources online that will take it from there. The household travel survey is a survey that AMATS does probably every 10 years. It'll be a robust, statistically valid survey that will ask for destination and origin information from people across the region. And so I think I'll just leave it at that and let our consultant take it from there. If they're online, is Bobby or Ilana online?
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. They'll share their screen and they have a presentation. And then the ask after their presentation, the big ask for the committee is that this survey has an opportunity to ask some policy level questions, because it's going to go out in a broader concept than AMATS is usually able to do. So we want your guidance on what policy questions we should include in that survey. Go ahead, Bobby.
Okay, just want to check real quick to make sure everyone's seeing the presentation on their screens over in Anchorage.
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. Well, I'll start with a quick introduction. My name is Bobby Wortman. I am the project manager for the Household Travel Survey. The last time I was in front of the PC, I was presenting on child demand model topics, so I'm happy to be here presenting on a different topic today, and I'm joined by our Deputy Project Manager, Alona Reagan. If you want to advance to the next slide.
Sure. So I think we'll start with a little bit of context. Christine, mentioned that this is a household travel survey that collects day-to-day travel information for residents in a given state or region. And this type of survey was last conducted in Anchorage in 2014. Residents will provide demographic information, typical travel details, and a full travel log for at least one day. And then that data is used to inform travel demand models and transportation investments in the coming years. We will be using address-based sampling to ensure a representative and random sample that will then be weighted to represent the entire region. This survey will be going into field September through October of 2025, and survey programming will begin this coming January, which is why we're presenting to you now. A bit more of the survey process overview. Respondents will receive an initial invitation by mail to join the study with the option to participate online by calling via phone or by downloading a smartphone app called AMATS. Respondents will then complete a sign-up survey and provide basic demographic and household composition details, and they will then be assigned a travel period in the future. After or during that travel period, respondents will provide details about the trips that they make, including information like travel modes or trip purposes. They'll also answer various questions each day about their typical travel behavior, and this is where we have an opportunity to add 1 or 2 attitudinal questions that are policy related. And then as a note, participants will receive an incentive, a gift card between $10 and $30, depending on how they participate and how many members are in their household. And then you can see some examples of the survey instruments, both the online version of Our Move and the smartphone app Our Move on this slide.
All right, so next we're going to talk about some of the policy questions. Before we kind of dive into those questions, I did want to take a moment here to just kind of remind the policy committee of some of the themes that emerged out of the last 2050 MTP and why we want to ask potentially a policy related question now as that new MTP planning cycle begins again. So some of the big challenges that were identified from the MTP are gaps in the system, winter maintenance and safety issues for active transportation, funding and winter maintenance, as well as a reliance on vehicle transportation, modal conflicts, winter maintenance as well, again, and then aging infrastructure and modal conflicts again under freight, and as well as winter maintenance. Some of the successes for active transportation are the extensive multi-use trail system, public transport for rideshare and increased route frequency, on the vehicular side, managed congestion and vehicle access, and on the freight, the same thing. And so we have the MPO has a opportunity here to talk about or to ask respondents, because it's a representative sample, about what potential planning questions or policy related questions might be beneficial to the region. And we went to the TAC and presented 4 different questions. They had come up with a series of revisions to those questions. These questions typically focus on funding priorities, but they can also focus on potentially like important regional efforts that might be underway. So if there, for example, in other regions, if there's a big proposal to change route frequency on the transit system, that might be a question they ask. But typically these tend to focus around funding priority questions. And because this is a representative sample that is random based, as opposed to a planning process, which tends to be more convenience based. So typically these kind of bigger picture policy questions tend to be more insightful at this level because of the representativeness of the survey effort being conducted. Advance to the next slide. So the first question here is about how as the original question on budget priorities, and in this exercise, it was intended that the the respondent would essentially divide up on a percentage basis how they would fund those categories. The next slide is the TAC recommended changes to those. So instead of dividing the budget amongst all these different options, we would just simply have them rank the priority in order, as opposed to trying to allocate a given percentage of the budget to each of the categories. TAC had recommended that another option be given so that they could specify one that might not be there. And then those results can be further tabulated after the survey is completed. TAC had also recommended a none of the above response. Our recommendation at RSG, just because of the limitations of the RMove application, since it's purpose-built for household travel surveys, not necessarily attitudinal or complex attitudinal questions, is that this one either be the none of the above is either removed or is rephrased as a no response question. The next question is about behavioral incentives around driving alone, and this could be pricing type questions around congestion pricing if toll roads were being proposed or considered at any point, or parking fees potentially if the municipality has the ability to control parking fees in the region. This would be a simple latent response, so we just ask questions on strongly opposed to strongly support. The next question is the proposed question of behavioral incentives and having them rank the most important factors that affect their comfortability walking or biking as part of their daily travel. This question was revised by the TAC, and here in red, you can see the proposals by the TAC for this question, and ranking the most important factors that affect your comfortability and perceptions of safety walking and biking as part of your daily travel, with the additional option to include another category, which they could then specify. And finally, the fourth question was one on funding policy, and this one would be about how much, which transportation project would they pay additional taxes or fees for, and then just selecting all that apply. I won't go into any details on these. I think these are in your packet, so we don't need to spend a lot of time going through all of them, but happy to answer questions. I think it's important to note that the TAC, the recommendation was on the first question on the budget priorities, and then the third question on the behavioral incentives. And with that, we can open up for questions from the committee.
Does the committee have any questions?
I have a few.
Please, Ms. Zelta.
Thank you. So thanks for the revised questions. I guess I'm a little bit concerned and kind of want to know what the rationale is a bit better on the behavioral incentives revision. If you are simply asking people if they want to be charged more money for things, you're always going to get strongly opposed. I think the way that question is worded versus the way it was before in terms of what policies could discourage driving alone versus, hey, it's going to cost you more if you drive alone. Would you like that or would you oppose that? I think we're only going to get opposition. So is there a rationale as to why that change is made or suggested?
I think, and one clarifying point, that the document that you have there, Meg, is I asked Aaron for a document. So the blue is the TAC suggestions, and the red in this document is my ideas.
I guess my question would be for you.
You got it. I think that's a great point, and if you want to reword it, I'd be totally comfortable with that. My goal in the red was almost exclusively to increase clarity and use simpler language that a survey respondent would be more likely to understand.
Okay.
So my intention, for the most part, was not to change the meaning, but rather to clarify. So if there's anything in here that you all would change, these are very tentative suggestions and open
The
to other
danger of
ideas.
handing out a paper in real time. I do have a question on the blue though, and number one, just rank the following in order of priority. There are quite a few to rank there. Would it require full ranking, or if someone stops because they thought that they didn't have anything more to say, would it still be a valid response?
So I think I'll make 2 points here. The first one is that because we have to consider respondent burden in this survey, and by the time the respondent gets to these questions, they'll have already participated either for a full day of their travel diary or potentially a full 7 days. So we have to consider the respondent burden at the end of this. So there's only room in the survey really with the measured amount of respondent burden to include one or two of these. And if we go with a more complicated one, like the first one, there's really only enough room in here for one question. To your question that you just asked, though, if somebody decides not to respond, like say they enter in like 1, 2, and 3 on everything, and then decided not to respond, that would still go through, and then we would have to post-analyze that and determine what happens with those responses that are not answered. And so those could either potentially be dropped, or they might be all given the same amount of weight.
I have one last question, if I may.
Please.
So the only option for when you get to handle these policy questions is after you've done those other things, or will they be available to participants at any time during their participation?
This would be one of the last questions asked. So the primary goal, primary objective of the household travel survey is to collect the observed travel behavior of the population or the people who are responding in the survey or selected to participate in the survey based off random sample. And so this would be a question that's just asked at the end of it. So it would be available to everybody that completes the survey, but it will only be asked at the end.
Other questions? I guess I have one, and I apologize if you covered it, but curious what you consider the region for the survey. And we have an interstate system that runs through the city, so just kind of curious if the region stops at the AMATS boundary, the municipal boundary, or what the limits of that region are.
I believe the sample region is the AMATS boundary, which is going to include all the Anchorage Bowl plus Chugiak Eagle River.
Any other questions?
And then that sample boundary too is based off of the location of the household. So the person has to have a household or be living in that area.
So our action will be to select 1 or 2 of these questions to be included.
I'll read that when we get there. I can read that action back. But are there any comments from the public? Not seeing any. Let me read that action back. The action requested is AMATS staff is asking policy committee to review the proposed policy level questions for the household travel survey. They're also asking the committee to either approve or suggest changes to up to 2 of the provided questions and to consider the recommendations made by the technical advisory committee. The policy questions asked are, I'm not sure what the best way to approach this is, but I'll read through the policy questions, I guess. The first one, the advisory committee suggested selecting questions 1 and 3 with the modifications that were in blue in the document that was handed out. The second was the survey will be translated into 5 safe harbor languages of the area: Hmong, Tagalog, Korean, Spanish, and Samoan. The committee also moved to include Yupik as one of the languages that the survey is translated into. Number 3 and final is the committee also moved to request staff to scrub the language used in the rank options to remove any perceived biases that could be a turnoff for survey takers.
You want a motion?
Yes,
Great.
please.
Move to put forward policy level questions 1 and 3.
Second. Anybody opposed to that?
Can we just start with that as the motion and then?
Yeah. And then discuss the motion.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Any conversation on the motion?
Yeah, can I speak to why I chose those 2, please?
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like Mr. Downing's change to number 1. I think that's great. The second to last symbol there on the first page, it says adding more regionally for biking and walking. I think that's weirdly worded. So I don't know if we want to possibly amend that, but otherwise I think the changes suggested by Mr. Downing are good. For number 3, so this is really like what where are your priorities money wise? And then number 3, rank. I like Mr. Downey's changes there too, and I would recommend we accept them. Rank the following factors based on how much they influence your decision to walk or bike. The only thought I had there is there any way to possibly say walk, bike, or use public transit? Because a lot of the same factors are still at play: temperature, weather, lighting, speed of cars around you while you're waiting. Because I think what we're trying to get at with that one is, why would you choose not to get in your car? And those are the 3 primary options we have potentially available to us. So, but with those 2 minor tweaks, I think these are both good questions to get us 2 very different perspectives. Money, and then, right, if you are a non-motorized user or you think about it, what are your main factors, which I think we've kind of been trying to get at for a while and just haven't been able to nail down. Thanks.
Any more discussion? I just had one comment, and it was in question 1. I think you might have covered it, Graham. I thought we should be a little bit more direct about reallocating space in the right of way to help snow removal efficiency. I thought we should be more direct and ask whether traffic lanes should be removed to create that reallocation. But I think you covered it exactly. I think you added purchase property. You added that bullet of purchase property along the roadway for that to add space or to reduce lane widths or drop lanes to use for snow storage. I feel like that covers it.
Yeah, and I should say not committed to any of the language. So if committee members have tweaks, members all those make sense to me.
Okay, so the motion that we have on the floor is to sort of have it be questions 1 and 3.
It's a suggestion.
Is that captured in your motion?
I think so. I hope it is with
We would
using
need
Graham's.
we would need an amendment
Okay,
or a friendly amendment.
to
Okay.
have Graham's edits incorporated.
Along with Meg's suggestions or
Yes.
great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Or use public transit
Yes.
for number
public
3.
transit, yeah.
Did you capture that, Aaron?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So the motion is to amend the motion to include Mr. Downey's edits as adjusted by Ms. Zelatel.
Yes.
Do I need a second on that, or is it a
Yes.
friendly amendment?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. And that was moved by Mr. Voland and seconded by Ms. Salatel.
Is there anybody opposed to the amendment? Not hearing any. The amendment is approved. I need help.
You're doing great.
You're fine. You're doing good.
And then
You're in line with Robert's rules.
Yeah, you're doing
Main
good.
motion.
Yeah. So the main motion is we're talking about items 1 and 3. And so I think we cured 1. Item number 3 is, or did we cure 3?
Yeah. I think we
We
cleared it.
cured both. Okay. So the main motion was, can you help me with what the main motion was?
So the main motion was to move forward on approving policy level questions number 1 and 3. It has now been amended as discussed at the meeting based on Graham's edits and the discussion we had today here from Ms. Zalatel. So now we're just waiting for action on the main motion itself as amended.
So that's been moved. And so do we need a motion to approve as amended? No.
Just
We
need a vote.
on it. Okay.
Yep.
Is there anybody opposed to the motion? Not hearing any. That's approved. Action item 5B, the AMATS household survey item is approved. See if I can regroup here a little bit. Actually, we're on to action item 5C, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Program letter of support. Is there a presentation here?
Yes, there'll just be a quick one for me. Just to let you know, we received a request from DOT, Anna Boson, to provide a letter of support for the HSIP nominations for FY25 from the Department of Transportation Central Region. So before you is that letter of support. There are 9 projects that are listed in here. Happy to help go through them if you have any questions on them. Just as a reminder, we did have a work session in June to go over the HSIP projects that were in the tip at the time and to have discussions about the nomination process. I do want to thank DOT a lot for their involvement with us and incorporating AMATS into the process and giving us the opportunity to provide nominations, which is a change from the past. And I look forward to continued awesome coordination between the two groups. The motion before you is to approve the letter of support as written. The Technical Advisory Committee reviewed the letter and they recommended such to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Questions or comments from the committee?
I may say that Mayor sent a similar letter to DOT just a few days ago, so I'll be in support.
Min, I have just one question. Like, they're listed in order 1 through 9. Is that in order of priority?
No, that was the order that was sent to us for this draft letter of support. So we basically received kind of a template from DOT. I updated it for the AMATS portion of how we normally send letters, and then just left the projects in there as is based on that. But I do not believe they are in order of priority.
Okay. And I guess those, so everybody understands the program, and I think Anna's online, so if I misspeak, she can help me out. But so these are nominations. They compete on a statewide level for funding, so it's not guaranteed that that these will be approved. But like I said, they'll be scored against statewide needs. Yes, and if Anna's online, are you online? Yeah.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I just have 2, which I think are easy questions for you. Some of those scopes are just for the difficulty of maintenance. You know, a lot of times these projects, well, they aren't popular because we usually slow down traffic or block off shortcuts, things like that. Certainly do that for the safety of the traveling public. In particular, I guess that project number 6 spoke about pinning concrete barriers up and down the Seward Highway. And I assume that we'll work with our maintenance group to talk about how that's going to work and not make their maintenance terribly inefficient. And that if there's another option that will accomplish the same thing, we could modify that scope. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I would say that these are planning level design elements included with the understanding of what the scope is to improve the safety of the users. And so we can discuss design specifics with maintenance and with our transportation partners at the city. Some of these locations are actually maintained by the city of Anchorage. And so we would work closely with them as well for those projects.
Thanks. And then I know at the Technical Advisory Committee, project number 8 came up as maybe if we got rid of that Turpin exit, it could cause a problem in other areas. So I assume that either the work has already been done or it will be done to determine that that's the right solution, I guess, for that off ramp. If it does create more problem than it's creating now, that we would just abandon that project and not build it, right?
Yeah, so right now that project nomination is likely going to go through the Glen highway reconstruction project scoping and discussion with that group, and it would involve public involvement through that project and analysis and such for that. Yeah, I will say, I'll correct for the record, last Technical Advisory Committee meeting, I made a statement that there was a less than 1,000 cars using the off-ramp, and I believe one of the off-ramps is 2,000 cars, 2,300 cars, and then the on-ramp is 1,200 cars. So, and that's during summer peak conditions. So, those are the volumes that are using today, Turpin on and off ramps, but there's circulation, there's moose crashes that are happening because the fence is broken in that section. So there's other factors contributing to crashes in that area, but we'll be looking closely and working closely with the design team for that and including the public.
Thanks. That answers my questions. Did that?
I have a
Oh,
question.
yeah, please.
You said these would be scored by scoring statewide. Who participates on the scoring committee for those?
Help me out with that one, Anna. Who's
Sure.
on the scoring committee?
And I forgot to introduce myself, sorry, Central Region Traffic Safety Engineer. So each region submits their request to headquarters within DOT. And so the projects are selected by the chief engineer.
So it's not a scoring committee, it is a singular person who makes this choice?
The statewide traffic engineer provides a recommendation list to the chief engineer on all the criteria. So the benefit cost, which target measures that each project is trying to resolve, how much it's aligned. They colloquially call the spreadsheet the rainbow spreadsheet because it has many criteria, and then of course also the federal eligibility of it. But yes, it is internally chosen and then put forward to FHWA for agreement.
Does the scoring ever see the light of day? Does it become a public document? The scoring?
Let's see, it looks like maybe Pam Golden, if you're online, you can speak to that portion.
Yeah, if it's okay for me. I'm Pam Golden. I'm the state traffic and safety engineer, and I just learned about this meeting, so I popped in. The scoring criteria is so how it works is the regions nominate. We throw the projects that we believe at the traffic engineer level are eligible to the chief engineer who confirms that. Then we score for funding. We're not scoring for whether projects are in or out. We're scoring for who gets funded at what point. So, and it's a very prescriptive process. It's laid out in our manual. And then, yes, as Anna said, we call it the rainbow spreadsheet because it's got different colors in for different scoring criteria. So it's the number of crashes to be addressed. It's how fast is this going to be delivered? So if something's supposed to be delivered sooner, it gets scored higher for funding. How it's currently this year, I believe we have fewer projects than funding available. So really the scoring criteria is to draw the line in the sand of where we run out of money, because some years we do that. I do not foresee that being an issue this year. So it's not scored to whether it's in or out of the program. It's eligible, so it's in. It's just at what year they can get funded.
I have one last question, if please. Why is New Seward and 36 not on here? That intersection. It was deemed the most dangerous intersection in the state of Alaska. It's gone through design. I'm really curious why we're not looking at using highway safety dollars for it if we have safety concerns about that particular intersection, and it's so far along. It's my district. My neighbors are very concerned, especially since DOT came and ripped out all the trees around there. And so what are we going to do to make that safe? I mean, is this one of those places where that project or a portion of that project could be considered?
Yeah, and Pam can help me with that one too, maybe, but I have a fair amount of passion for that project as well. We haven't reached an environmental document on that, but we do have some state funding to at least get us to that point. I think that there's potential. I feel like it's a big project for the HSIP, for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, but I feel like we've funded interchanges before. Pam, is that true?
So, thank you. So really what it comes down to is that project exceeds the amount of funding we get in any year for HSIP. We would not be able to do anything else in the state for like 2 years. It was proposed to the HSIP program maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I was in a different role, and it was basically our handbook excludes anything that would use up the entire funding of the program because we've got to go with statewide needs. So that one just sort of got kicked to, we've got to find another funding source. We can't do what's called supplanting, where we just take part of it as HSIP and part of it as something else to stay aligned with federal rules on the funding.
Disappointing.
Any other questions from the committee? I'm not hearing any. Are there any comments from the public? We have one. Please state your name and you have 3 minutes.
Thanks. My name is Emily Weiser. I am the board president at Bike Anchorage, who I'm representing today. We submitted a letter in support of this letter of support. We really appreciate these HSIP projects being nominated. I'm super excited about every single one of them. So I'm glad I'm not the one who has to choose, but we did highlight, I think, 4 projects that we're particularly excited about and support. It's really remarkable how all of these align so nicely with the action plan that the Muni and DOT have put forward for reducing roadway deaths. And that's a really nice illustration of how we can take that kind of evidence-based solutions and turn them into projects. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiser. Anybody else?
Yes, there's an individual online.
Should we go to Mr. Starzik in the back, please? And then we can go on. Is that good?
James Starzik, DOT planning. I think it would be helpful for maybe John or someone from highway safety to talk about which projects are actually being planned on being nominated versus the entire package, because I do believe there's a difference between the list of 9 and the list of that is actually being forwarded from Central Region.
I don't know the answer to that, but perhaps Anna or Pam do. Did you hear that question?
Yeah,
Pam?
this is
Sorry.
Susanna.
Anna?
Yeah, so thank you, James, for bringing that up. So this letter does represent the initial list of desired projects that were initially submitted to headquarters. The process is kind of iterative, where headquarters gives the region feedback on the types of details that are needed in order for federal eligibility and for consideration. And so the initial list is long, and so some of those projects, although were whittled down to meet the tight deadline of submission earlier last week, we still plan to move forward with the scope and content of all of these projects during a supplemental nomination cycle. So it's still valuable to get this committee's support on all of these projects so that we can include that in the nomination cycles as we continue. It's every year a struggle to put together comprehensive, very detailed and technical requests, as well as to include the comprehensive coordination with AMATS and the city of Anchorage and the other jurisdictions outside of the Anchorage area that are in the region. So the ultimate list that was submitted based on headquarters feedback was the variable speed limit reduction for the traffic safety corridor, the Ingra-Gamble couplet lane reduction, and then the Northern Light lane reduction with pedestrian features added. So those 3 were ultimately submitted based on headquarters feedback.
Thank you. With the remaining 6 potentially being submitted later in a later round.
Yes.
We have one question online.
We do have somebody. We do have a comment.
Yes.
Says their audio is not working, so we'll just read it out loud. Hello, I'm Aisha. Unfortunately, my audio is not working, but I live off Turpin Street and I object to closing of the Turpin exit. My family and other families use this exit on a daily basis. Closing the exit would create a burden and great inconvenience for the residents. It would also create traffic and congestion. That's all we had. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other comments online.
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Not that I can see.
So we're on to the will of the committee, I believe. And the action would be to
Send the
forward this letter to Anna.
To Anna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Letter
Yes, sir.
support.
So I'll move to approve.
Seconded.
Moved by Dr. Bowen, seconded by Mr. Downey. Is there anybody opposed to sending the letter?
Well,
I'd
I
like to
would like to
discuss
discuss.
Oh, sorry.
Is it okay if I
Please.
lead it
Yeah,
off? Okay.
yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to echo the public testimony. What Ms. Weiser said. When I saw this list in anticipation for this meeting, I felt like finally DOT is listening. And it felt very refreshing. I think that a number of these project nominations are exactly what the community has been asking for. So I'm thankful for the partnership with DOT and the municipality in recognizing we need to support active transportation, pedestrians, etc. And so reading through a list that says things like adding pedestrian crossings, non-motorized facilities widening, transit stop improvements, better lighting. For me, that is, it's very encouraging and it's very exciting. I will say, I sort of feel like we're doing this after the fact. If 3 projects have already been selected, I guess, to move forward of the 9, it feels a little bit awkward to me for us not to maybe have weighed in on that. So I'll just put that out there. But I think most of these projects I can certainly get behind. I think I will make an amendment, if that's okay. And that will be to remove project number 8, the Turpin interchange removal. I think some of these are of a higher value than that. And I'm curious about the way that would impact other ongoing, actually, I'll wait and see if I have a second before I dive in.
Second to the amendment.
Second.
Okay. Yeah, we have the Pell going on, which potentially is going to reimagine one of our highway systems. And so I know there's a lot of unanswered questions going on about, what will that do to dispersing traffic elsewhere in the municipality? So yeah, I think I would rather see the other projects that are listed here move forward sooner, and then maybe that's something that can be revisited once we know what we're going to do. There's an alternative selected for the Seward Glen connection Pell.
Any discussion on the amendment? Please, Mr. Downey.
Yeah, my sense is the technical advisory committee discussed this one in particular at great length, and I think there was concerns raised and discussed at the technical committee, and on balance decided that this was going to be a significant improvement for that neighborhood and for the highway. So I think I would like to keep it included.
Can I respond to
Please, yeah.
Yeah, I would just say the one public comment that we heard today was from somebody who lives there. They were not in support.
Right.
And so just because the technical advisory committee recommends something, we are the policy committee, we have final say.
For sure.
So just want to make that clear.
Any other discussion on the amendment? And I guess I'll just kind of second what Mr. Downey said, that a fair amount of work went into putting these together. They're data-based nominations, and so I would leave that in as well. And I think we go to vote now. We go to vote? More comments? So I guess we'll go one by one. Mr. Olds, do you have a vote on the amendment? So a vote on whether or not to delete item number 8, the Turpin interchange removal.
I guess I'm not opposed. I'd vote, with the amendment. So yay, yes.
So yes, yes to remove the Turpin interchange removal project from the letter?
Sure.
Mr. Dunn?
No?
Ms. Zolotel?
Yes.
Dr. Boland?
Yes.
Yes. And I'll vote no as well, but it looks like we'll remove project number 8 from the list. On to the main motion, which is to send the letter. Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, thanks for, interesting list of projects. And I mean, I'm hyper-focused on Midtown. This does very little for Midtown. Midtown is very hard to get across. It is very dangerous to get across, and this does nothing for Midtown. And it really focuses west and towards downtown or into the far east. And as we like to say, Midtown, you can't avoid us. So we really should be considering how we transit through what is the main part of our city in a safe manner. And I know there have been a number of issues that have just lingered. And this is why I brought up 36th and New Seward. Tudor Road continues to linger. They're big, and yet we can't find the tools to deal with them. And that is really disappointing because they continue to be barriers to good quality of life for folks who are trying to get through those parts of town. So I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't raise those concerns. And I will let you know, in nearly every community meeting we are having in Midtown, 36th and New Seward is coming up without a doubt. So is Tudor Road, so is the bridge, the overpass. And we went through a lot of work and we just aren't seeing any movement. So hopefully, while we can move these forward, we can also find other tools to move those forward as well. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I might say, I think, as referenced by Weiser, the Vision Zero Working Group Action Plan does include a number of changes on, for example, Tudor Road. So I think, this not being the end all be all of what we're doing, thankfully. And this is a really exciting list, and I'm thankful we're doing more than just this with that Vision Zero Working Group Plan. I think I guess maybe sort of a question would be, is it normal? Has the AMATS Policy Committee in general weighed in on HSIP projects, or is this sort of a newer, is this a newer thing? And
Sounds like it's relatively new.
Yeah, this is a new thing. I don't believe HSIP's ever come back before the policy committee in the past, either for discussion or letters of support or other things. A random project may come, but not kind of this process of having input into the nominations, a letter of support like this. This is first time.
so I'll say, as a first time, very thankful that that's happening. I think member Vollin's point, like maybe it happens a little earlier so we can weigh in before the projects are selected for that cutoff period. Maybe just like a learning moment in terms of timing, so we can have some weighing in on prioritization might be nice. But appreciate the outreach and also appreciate the projects.
Any other discussion? I think I'm going to move right to, is anybody opposed to sending the letter on behalf of the policy committee? I'm not hearing anybody, so it's approved. Is that the end of our action items?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So we're on to the Fish Creek Trail project. I think it has value if I just kind of kick that off and talk about federal process, where we're at in that. And there's probably somebody else here that could share some more. Well, we're going to have a presentation, I guess, so someone else will be able to share more of the actual status than I would, someone that knows more of the details. So this project is funded through AMATS, through the FHWA. The FHWA has an iterative process in that different milestones in the project development, we request authority to proceed that comes with funding from the Federal Highway Association or Administration. The first authority to proceed in this project is through the environmental document, and that's what we're operating on right now. We have not signed an environmental document yet, but when we do, we move on to the authority to proceed with final design. From there, we go to right-of-way acquisition, if there is any, and then construction and relocation of utilities. As I mentioned, the next step for us is to request that authority to proceed through final design. To get there, we need to sign the environmental document, and that's significant for a few reasons. That selects the alternative that will be constructed. The environmental documents required to be reevaluated at several milestones, but at least at each of those ATP milestones, authority to proceed milestones that I mentioned earlier. So we make the decision now. There's the opportunity to change the decisions if things come up later on that would cause another alternative to rise to the top. But it's important to make this selection, the right selection now, so that we don't waste our time and money and get up on the right path. Environmental document for this project is a programmatic categorical exclusion. It's the lowest level of a federal decisional document for the NEPA process that's used. And it's used when the environmental impacts are minimal. And it's the only document that the region is able to execute. All the other documents go to a statewide environmental group that's operates independently of the region. This is a low enough level that they trust the region with it. So there's that being the lowest level of document. It's just a form. It's a one-page form. It doesn't give the opportunity to discuss the process of the alternative selection. There's a potential that this decision could be challenged. And like I said, we've already spent over $1 million on the project. It's about a $16 million project for about a mile of trail. So it's important, it's prudent that we make sure that we're making the correct selection on the alternative. So a little bit unusual for this type of document, but we're putting together, I call it a decision matrix. It's maybe more of just a narrative that discusses pros and cons of all the alternatives that we evaluated and kind of puts a roadmap together on why the alternative was selected. So the alternative has not been officially selected until we sign that document. Yeah, so that's where we're at the process. You know, once that document is solid, the document will be signed and we'll move on to the next step. I don't have a timeline on that. There is a matrix put together already. There's some work that's going into that to kind of proof that up a little bit just to make sure that it's solid. We're in the middle of the holidays here in another week. And so, you know, I would say within the next month that we will have something like that put together. Generally, I guess, you know, it's one of the draws to Anchorage is a world-class trail system. So I voted for the bond myself personally. We're working on the downtown trail connection as well, which connects the coastal trail to the Ship Creek Trail. And that's, I think that's programmed to be obligated this year, probably construction started next year. We just finished up a few projects on the Fish Creek Trail as well. And I think that's kind of a hidden gem that doesn't get used very much. A connection to the coastal trail will certainly open that up to a lot more users. But the trail system is important to Anchorage and it's important to DOT to support that. So, anyway, from there, I'm going to
actually ask a couple procedural questions.
Sure.
So I'm looking at the TIB, right? That's the document. Yeah. And so I was looking at the Fish Creek Trail connection. I was just looking at the money. So I see the $500,000 for design right away from STBG funding in FY23, another 400,000 in FY24, and then now we're in FY25, right? Yeah, it started October 1, all of these. And so we have 7.4 of STBG, 1.9 of TAP, and then 5.6 million of CRP. What's CRP?
Carbon reduction program.
Great, thanks. So we have millions of dollars already programmed in the TIP then moving forward. So we spent 23 and 24 money? I mean, is this reflective of what we're actually
Obligated.
spending and doing?
I don't know if did we obligate that 24 money or did that get moved to 25?
I believe we obligated the 24 money and I don't think it's all been spent at this point, but they're spending it.
Because I'm looking at the last administrative modification, because we haven't done any other additional modifications of the TIP.
Yeah, the amendment 2 that was the last approved one.
Okay. And then when you mentioned the downtown trail connection, it said in FY24, there was about $12 million for utility or U/C utilities and construction. Did that go?
No, that's this amendment will move it into 25.
No, last TIP amendment number 2 moved it into 25 for the downtown trail connection. So it's 16.860 million for FY25 of downtown trail.
Okay. It's not what the document online says. So As a
Yeah, here, it's, amendment number 2.
amendment number 2,
Yes.
not modification number
Yes.
2. Okay. Great. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I'm tracking the right numbers at the right times.
Sure.
Thank you.
And the latest status that we have on that is it's going to be late summer advertised for bids. So
Okay.
I don't know if we'll see construction activity this year or next.
Spend a lot of time with this tip document. I want to make sure I'm understanding it. Thanks.
Should we go to presentation?
We should go to
Do
presentations. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair Holland. My name is Mike Braniff. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation for the municipality. And this presentation, it's an overview of the Fish Creek Trail Connection Project. This picture here on slide 1 looks north from Northern Lights Boulevard along this dotted line, which approximately showed the location of the trail. And by the way, there's quite a few slides here. I apologize in advance for the number of times I'll ask next slide, please, but next slide. So this project will connect key non-motorized facilities while addressing coastal erosion protection, drainage, and safety features, including ADA compliant elements. Next slide, please. And the project purpose is to establish a safe multi-use trail connecting Fish Creek Trail to Tony Knowles Coastal Trail. And in doing so, addressing gaps in Anchorage's trail system. So far, the funding for the project has been $1.54 million allocated to date, 91% of which is federally funded via the AMATS TIP, with voter approved local bonds covering the remainder 9%. Next slide, please. And so this map, it shows basically where existing trail options are. And the project supports development of a non-motorized connection between Fish Creek Trail and the coastal trail. And what the graphic really does is it illustrates the lack of non-motorized infrastructure north of West Northern Lights Boulevard and west of Minnesota, which are in yellow, and the coastal trail is in blue. And the project area is really in this rectangle area. Not a single non-motorized facility exists for north-south traverse, other than Northern Lights to Earthquake Park at the far west end of the map. Next slide, please. So 3 adopted plans highlight the wish for a connection through the Fish Creek estuary. The first of which is the 1997 Anchorage area-wide trails plan. The next is the 2021 AMATS non-motorized plan. And finally, the 2050 MTP. The project has been approved on 4 separate bonds, as well as approved by AMATS. Public comment and involvement have demonstrated that public support exists for a connection in this corridor. The project team has received a total of 220 comments directly. It's worth noting that of those comments, of the comments that are from 2022 and prior, to a preferred alternative being identified in opposition, reasoning can generally be broken down into 3 categories: homeowner and property concerns, environmental and wildlife impacts, and then misuse of funds. A lease to the railroad land on the northern end of the project was perceived as a threat to the project, and created an opportunity for people to speak to the project itself. And actually, most of this gets covered on the next slide. So next slide, please. Where we get to the timeline. So the 97 Anchorage Area-Wide Trails Plan identified 2 future paved paths paralleling Fish Creek between Northern Lights and the Coastal Trail. And then from 2016 to 2020, an AWU maintenance road was constructed and fenced the property, which restricted previous existing access to the estuary. Fish Creek Trail to the Ocean Group was formed around that time, and the Fish Creek Trail connection was included in the 2021 AMATS TIP. The Parks and Rec Department on bonds each April have passed 4 in a row. In 2022, we had project kickoff. The project website went live. We had stakeholder meetings along with pop-up public outreach on the coastal trail, public open house meetings, a draft DSR was completed. We received public comments, it obtained survey and geotechnical information. And as well that year, we passed the second bond supporting the project. Next slide, please. And this highlights further public outreach 2023 through 2025, and then project and the funding timeline. Next slide, please. Now, this timeline here is really where we're at with the project right now. Oh, next slide, please. I'm sorry. I'm one off. Where this spring, we look to bond $1.3 million for the construction portion that we will match, our 9%. And then later this year, the Railroad Board would approve that, and then bidding and construction would take place in 2026. And it's worth noting that the project team has been coordinating with the Railroad's engineering department, and they have been coordinating with board members and providing project updates. Next slide, please. And so that brings us to the current preferred alternative. During development of the DSR, 6 alternatives were explored. We'll take a look at those shortly. A preferred alternative is highlighted here in light blue as the environmental documents were formed over the last 2 years. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the southern alternatives. There's 3. And you'll see S1 and S2 here. They're similar. They traverse along the west side of the railroad. The third alternative, which is S3, explored an alternative along La Honda Drive nearby. That alternative was significantly more expensive, and it had more impacts to surrounding operations, including railroad operations. Next slide, please. And then this is a cross-section which really starts to show the layout of all of the different elements. If we start in the middle here, you'll see the railroad, and as we work to the left, which is west, you'll see the existing maintenance road. That was the one that was built between 2016 and 2020. There's an existing fence that comes next as we work left that belongs to the railroad. And then as we work uphill, we get into alternative S2 and S1. And then to the far left, the last line denotes private property lines. Next slide, please. And then this graphic is from the most recent version of the environmental document. And what this highlights is a cross-section of the trail near one of the private properties. You'll see the retaining wall. In red, the private property line, and as well the below ground circles here, the utilities. And what we anticipate are the limits of the potential construction zone, given that we cannot build within 50 feet of the railroad tracks. Next slide, please. Similarly, this is also from the same environmental document, shows a cross-section near another one of the private properties that is to the west. The red is the private property line. And then the proposed and existing fence noted here in blue and in yellow respectively, showing how existing fence would have to move or that change that would be made. Next slide, please. So those are the southern alternatives. Here, the northern alternatives, we have 3 as well. N3 is preferred. It can be paved entirely. It's the most cost effective, and it avoids impacts in the estuary, in Fish Creek estuary, and allows the project to realign a problematic portion of the coastal trail between Westchester Lagoon and the Fish Creek Bridge, I think anybody who's a frequent user of the coastal trail knows that this is a challenge section that's often crowded. The surface is fairly imperfect. With tree roots, there's basically fence on both sides of the trail, which tightens or narrows the corridor. And it has blind spots because of the curves that it takes through that section. And this is, like I said, another or an opportunity to address that as well. And as you look at the cost of the alternatives, N1 and N2 are significantly more expensive than the preferred N3. Next slide, please. Again, another cross section, and this one shows the existing maintenance road, alternative 2. Of course, alternative 3 is uphill, and as we work to the west here, we get down into the estuary itself. Next slide, please. When we bring them both together, this is the preferred alternative, depicted in light blue again. Some concerns that we've heard. Next slide. And next slide. So one concern we've heard is that the trail will impact private properties and backyards. And the goal of the project is to minimize impacts to private and adjacent properties. The only private property outside of railroad ownership and right-of-way will be an acquisition of a small amount of an asphalted area at an apartment complex at the far south end of the southern portion of the project, adjacent to a marathon block valve. We'll see that shortly. In fact, we can do next slide, please. And at the bottom of this aerial photo, this orange dotted line shows sort of a conceptual view of how the trail will move throughout the area. Next slide, please. And this zooms in this block valve for the marathon pipeline is inside this trapezoid or four-sided enclosed fence area. And as you can see, the orange line proceeds to a degree over this paved section, which belongs to an apartment complex. Next slide, please. Proceeding just a little further north along the southern portion, this graphic shows property lines according to the municipality's property information map, or the plats. Next slide, please. And this one highlights those property lines in red, and this yellow arrow shows the width of and better highlights the railroad corridor. And the next slide, please. This one's more helpful still. It shows the existing property boundaries, existing trees and other vegetation, the rail, and then just to the left or the west of the rail, the existing maintenance road. Next slide. This photo was taken near the private properties on the southern section of the trail. This is within the railroad corridor and adjacent to the private properties, which are, in this case, they're uphill and to the left. Next slide, please. Utility concerns. Next slide. Marathon believes that by constructing a non-motorized pathway, it will increase awareness and visibility to their facility. And the project team is dedicated to improving the area, especially the block valve location, to improve security and safety for both members of the public and for the utility itself. Next slide. Here we have members of the team walking around the block valve that's in the four-sided fence. They're proceeding onto the paved portion of the apartment complex that I mentioned previously. Next slide, please. There are other concerns, and this slide presentation is available to the public. I might sum this one up by saying simply that the project team is committed to working through any concerns during construction. We met with Marathon yesterday, along with others. We hear their very valid concerns, and we are working hard towards addressing their concerns. Next slide, please. This photo shows utility work that was completed on Northern Lights Boulevard in 2024. And this serves as an example of how infrastructure projects near pipelines are commonly successful and executed without incident. And we understand that there's inevitably going to be times when Marathon will have to close the trail to perform maintenance, whether that's expected or unexpected. And we know that that just goes with it. Some post-construction concerns. The project team certainly recognizes that the project will introduce new maintenance challenges for Marathon within the corridor. However, Marathon has a really strong proven track record, successfully completing projects and managing facilities throughout Anchorage. And it demonstrates that this initiative is consistent with standard operations and presents minimal infrastructure concerns. Moreover, I think the benefits far outweigh the added maintenance responsibilities for the municipality. Next slide, please.
We're about 16 minutes in.
Okay. I think I'm just a couple of finish line. And yeah, okay. Thanks, Sean. And we already went through this one. And again, this slide is available to the public on the project website. Really in summary, I think noting the time, I'll leave it at that. If you just forward to the last slide, please. Everybody can see the project website. Here you can access this presentation as really all, as well as all the publicly available materials that have been accumulated in going through the process. And Chair, I thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thanks for presenting.
Sure.
Comments or questions from the committee? We'll let Ms. Zalatel go.
Yep, go ahead.
Great. A couple of questions for Mike. On the block valve, can the project provide additional screening and security? Right now, it's just a chain link fence. Are there things that we can do to design and accommodate Marathon's concerns around that with the trail coming nearby?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll rely on staff. And Taylor, if you'd like to come up and
I could us.
or Graham, you want to take it?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
in the big packet of papers that I'm sorry we printed, you'll find a letter from Marathon to me from yesterday, and in it they suggest a number of design ideas for the block valve that the team will be considering, including like a visually, like a pretty mural or some other things of potentially encasing the block valve to increase security there.
Okay, I'm not sure a mural would make it less visible, but yeah, maybe less likely to mess with.
Well, maybe prettier than a concrete block building.
Well, and so then that question comes like, this got quite a fun stack according to the tip. So can we use MOA funding to accommodate those needs, like bond funding? And then kind of tied in with that, I heard it may need a little bit more maintenance and operations than what we typically would for this kind of facility. So can we accommodate that and plan for that in the spring bonding opportunity?
Yeah, I don't know what would prevent us using municipal funds from better, I don't know, securing the block valve. In terms of, the added maintenance that may go with it, we're prepared to take that on. We understand what that is.
Okay,
So,
good. Thank you.
That would be federally participating, and maybe I misunderstood your question, but.
I just want to know kind of what's the flexibility of our contribution to kind of meet some of the ongoing project needs that are coming up around the security and screening, or if there's additional ongoing maintenance or operation considerations for Parks and Rec as they maintain the facility into the future. Because our bonds usually include an M&O provision.
Yeah, and that could be part of the negotiations with Marathon.
Yep.
Answer questions?
Well, sure. So we do have our municipal attorney here, and I would like the opportunity to hear from her. I know there's been a lot of back and forth about certain property rights, boundaries, lack thereof, and letters exchanged. And so I thought it might be helpful to briefly hear from.
I'm challenged by that a little bit. Certainly, that's going to be a question that we need to answer. We're time constrained a little bit if we're going to get through the end of the agenda. There's also probably a counterpoint to that. I don't rather not get into a legal discussion on that at this point. I'm not sure I see the value of it.
Okay, so I don't know how we want to do this in AMATS, but typically at our assembly meetings, if a member asks a question from somebody within the municipality, we have the opportunity to hear from them. And I believe that Ms. Gardner is prepared to give carefully constrained comments and to weigh in.
I don't know what's our operating agreement.
It doesn't say anything, but historically, yes, if anybody on the committee has a question that can be answered by somebody from staff or the public or whatever, we give them the opportunity.
Mhm. Okay.
But recognize
We have a
do
hard
have
stop at,
time.
yeah, okay. Come on up, people, please.
Oh, hi. Eva Gardner, Municipal Attorney for Anchorage. And this will just be a very brief discussion of our conclusions so far from the Municipal Attorney's Office. I mean, assuming this is what you want to hear, on the private property concerns that have been raised. So next slide, please. So far we have heard from two landowners with two different questions. So the first question is about a portion of Forest Park Drive that we understand is important for trail construction. This is a portion east of the Alaska Railroad. And the question is, well, is that a public road or is it a private driveway? The second question is from a different property owner who owns property on Resolution Drive. And the question there is whether a portion of an area currently used as a backyard, is that, private property that will be infringed on by the construction of the trail, or is it not? So next slide, please. I'll just briefly address our conclusions. So we have looked into both of these issues in pretty close detail. And for the first question, the Forest Park Drive question, we've concluded based on a pretty exhaustive review of the platting history and the property records that the entirety of Forest Park Drive, all the way to the railroad, is public. And so this graphic right here walks through a few of the plats, historical plats, and the one on the bottom right-hand corner is the ultimate plat that we looked at, plat 6530. And so this is an area that was originally held by the Lingo family. The subdivisions in the area are named after Lingo. And we concluded that it no later than 1965, and in fact, potentially earlier, it was dedicated to the public. And the fact that it has perhaps been used as a private driveway does not change that fact, because under municipal charter, only the assembly can change the status of a roadway or public property from public to private. And that action never took place. Adverse possession is not a remedy that's available against governments. That's a matter of Alaska statute. So based on our analysis with quite a bit of back and forth and looking in close detail at the full original platting file, including minutes of the platting board meeting in 1965, multiple meetings, we concluded that that is public. Next slide. The second question involves, and this probably affects a few properties along Resolution Drive, and this is west of the railroad tracks. And the current plan for the current preferred alternative for the trail is kind of between the railroad tracks, west of the AWU access road, and then between the private property there. And looking at this, it was a bit of a more straightforward issue, because looking at the plats, the landowners on that in that neighborhood, they owned their platted parcels, and the platted parcels property lines end at the edge of the 100-foot railroad right-of-way to the west. And so there isn't really any question of overlap there. Their property rights end and the railroad right-of-way begins. And if you go to the next slide, this is sorry, it's a little small. The graphic that Mr. Braniff showed in his presentation, it shows that the entirety of the trail is going to be constructed within the Alaska Railroad's right-of-way. And in fact, a significant portion of the area currently used as backyard is not in fact private property, and there are currently no permits from the railroad allowing that use. So, but even with that, the current plan, the current preferred alternative would only move the existing fence of the area currently used as a private backyard about 2 or 3 feet. And that could vary by up to 7 feet, is my understanding, based on location of the Marathon pipeline. But at worst case scenario, it would be 10 feet in, which would still be over 15 feet from the actual private property line. So overall, ultimately, we've concluded that there are no actual tangible private property rights in the land that would be necessary for trail construction.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion?
I have a question for you, if I may.
Yeah.
Where is DOT on this? I'm kind of curious, like where are you all on this issue, this question? Right, my email blew up, but we haven't had a chance to talk. I would love to know where, like, on moving forward with this project. You know, I heard there's a pause, but I'm not quite sure how that works when it's programmed into the tip. So I'm kind of curious where you're at.
I guess we've had the conversation internally that it's the most probably could be the most popular project in Anchorage. I think the selected alternative needs to be go through the process and let that determine what that is.
So no formal requests or changes like to the tip or anything right now, just keep going as it is in tip amendment 2?
Right. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I ask is we're getting ready in January to consider our bond package. And it has to be decided by the 21st. And we are planning, I believe, to include something on the bond package. And so I want to make sure we're in good, close, open communication about if there's any concerns about us bonding for it, because that's us going out to the public saying this thing's, we're really wanting it to happen.
Sure. We should be working on our next tip amendment there too, so we should have a draft.
It'll be in January, so January meeting, yeah. But there's no changes to this project that I've been given at this point.
I guess I'll be more blunt. Is DOT planning to propose any changes to this project in the upcoming tip amendment?
Not right now.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So I do want to point out for folks in the room, there is a copy of a resolution passed by the Anchorage Assembly on December 17th, which passed unanimously in support of the Fish Creek Trail Connection Project. There's copies on the table there if anyone wants to grab one. It did pass unanimously, 11-0. There was one member absent, Chair Constant, but I know that he's a supporter of this project too. And so certainly the elected officials, the Anchorage Assembly wants to see this project move forward in a timely fashion. And so I guess, you know, we were also afforded a copy of a letter from Bike Anchorage. And one of the questions that they had, and I think this was prompted by the TAC meeting, is the Fish Creek Trail Connection Project officially on hold? So I'd like to ask that question, but I would also like to ask that in the context of there was some community outreach that was supposed to be done. And in fact, I recently attended to give a report at the Spenard Community Council. And they had on their agenda from the project team that was going to be an update, and then they were asked to be removed. That never happened. They didn't show up to engage the community council. So is there a delay here? Is the project on hold? What is going on?
I kind of gave that status already, now that we're preparing that document to give a roadmap of the alternative that we're going to select. I did ask those guys to postpone those public meetings because I want to be able to present the alternative that we're going to pursue. I can admit to making some mistakes, and maybe that's one of them. Maybe we should have gone and presented anyway, but that's where we're at.
Yeah. Well, I think the community is just interested in, you know, they want to see this move forward. As you said, it's very popular. And then I guess I just have a question around, you know, in Director Branough's presentation, there was a preferred alternative. And then when you say that the alternative that we're going to select, how do those two things interplay?
Yeah, as I mentioned, that the environmental document formally selects the alternative.
Of the ones that he outlined?
Of the alternatives that were evaluated. Based on a wide variety of criteria.
Is any credence then given to the preferred alternative that was
absolutely
in that presentation?
Public opinion is also. It's okay.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions from the committee?
I may make one.
Please. Yeah.
In this room yesterday morning, we had a really good meeting. Unfortunately, not able to invite the full policy committee because of the Open Meetings Act, but Director Holland and I met with Marathon and the railroad and AWU and a bunch of other, and Parks Department and other stakeholders to address Marathon's concerns. The letter they sent me it should be in the public record so the public can review it. Clearly outlines their concerns. I think what was really most exciting about that meeting is we were able to walk through each of their issues and clearly identify a path forward on each of them. So I'm just really thankful. Can we silence that?
Whoever just joined, can you please silence your, I think we need to be responsible for muting people too. Yeah. I'll just say, very thankful to Marathon coming to the table. What I heard very clearly from them at the end of the meeting is they're supportive of the project and are excited to see it moving forward and have no concerns that they're very confident that every one of their concerns can and will be addressed as we go through the process. So wanted to relay that since we asked them not to be here. So.
Or they asked not to be here.
That's also, yeah.
Let them off the hook.
Yeah.
So, yeah, please.
So does the policy committee weigh in on an alternative or no?
No, not really. There's never really been a mechanism where the policy committee is involved in that process, aside from asking the project team to come present on it. So I've been trying to do that more and more often. So,
Okay, I'm just thinking of the intersection of bond funds and how that works. I mean, an alternative that isn't supported by the body would be problematic because we ultimately have to appropriate those bond funds over to the project. So I want to make sure we're finding a way to keep not just the 2 policy committee members, but 10 other assembly members, because it is high profile. I'm not joking when I say our emails blew up. So just want to keep that in mind as we move forward, as the environmental document reveals whatever the preferred alternative is, so that and maybe we can also leverage the Assembly's Transportation Committee to continue that conversation so that they're fully briefed, because the bonds will go forward to the voters in April, and then it'll just be a segment of appropriations that come through the body. And the Parks bond, getting $1.3 million of what's traditionally a $4 to $7 million bond is a good chunk. That's a big project for the Parks bond. So I just want to underscore how significant that is from our point of view. And then I think what really made our emails go a bit nuts was this idea that the project was on pause. That's not a transportation term. That's not something we're used to. We don't know what on pause means. And so to the extent we can open those lines of communication if there's a concern or there needs to be some additional process, that's really helpful, because I don't have a lot to say until I get here and I get briefed, because I'm not in that loop. And as Mr. Downing said, Open Meetings Act keeps us from having more than 2 of us discuss an issue. And so there will always be someone on the outside of one of these things if the committee is going to be considering it. And so just really wanting to figure out how we can best be communicating.
Sure.
Thank you.
And you have my cell phone, both of you guys have my cell phone,
Can't
so.
call you about it though, as soon as you talk to Mr. Downing.
Oh, I suppose you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, Open Meetings Act.
Well, you can contact the project, though. We have project contacts. I'll call them. But yeah, the process, it's not like I mean, ideally, we select an alternative and that's what gets built. We do have to reevaluate that document several times, so that decision can be changed, but ideally, that's where we end up where we start. So, any other comments or questions from the company? Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public. Any comments from the public? And state your name, you get 3 minutes. Please.
Okay, go ahead. Hi again, my name is Emily Weiser with Bike Anchorage. Yeah, we've supported this trail connection from the start. It's a really valuable connection, as well as part of the gem of Anchorage, which is our Greenbelt trails. We've also supported what is currently being called the preferred alternative as the most fiscally responsible, as well as really mitigating impacts to the railroad and private property owners, and allowing the trail to be paved, which we support. But yeah, reiterating that support. And also, almost every time I'm doing something public facing with Bike Anchorage, someone asks me about what's going on with Fish Creek Trail. So it is very popular, and they're almost always in support of it. I do think there's been a lot of confusion the last few weeks about the status of the project, and it would be really helpful, I think, if DOT could provide a formal statement on what is the status, what is the next step, when will that be, just to clear that up, because, rumors are flying and people are very concerned, and something real definitive that we can point to would be super helpful. So yeah, looking forward to see it proceed. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please.
My name's Karen Button. I'm the board president of Friends of Fish Creek. And as a private community member, I was one of the founding members of the Fish Creek Trail to the Ocean that kind of brought this forward. I guess I think you all know, how popular this trail is, how much the community wants it. I have a couple of questions. I would say, from the DOT, I've talked to the special liaison to the commissioner and was assured that this project is something that the commissioner fully supports. That was helpful. Many of us, all of us actually who support this trail were shocked, as everyone knows, at the TAC meeting when we learned that the project was on hold. That's the terminology that was used, without any transparency. I think that's where the rumors are, kind of flying around, is the lack of transparency. I guess a couple of, observations and questions. First is, I've talked to the private property owner on the south end, and his concerns have to do, his and the neighbors he's representing there, has to do with where the property line is, and that they have had a lease with the railroad in the past, and that those leases were terminated. So I guess one of the questions I have for DOT is, given that the railroad is under the jurisdiction, more or less, I guess I'll say, of DOT, has there been any discussion internally about trying to talk to the railroad about moving the trail a bit to the east? This would eliminate the threat of lawsuits from those property owners, which we're all concerned about because we want the project to move forward. And, there's many places in town where, the railroad is 20 to 30 feet from a trail or from a roadway. International Frontage Road is one spot. The Coastal Trail right around Westchester is another spot, Elderberry Park. So the railroad's not being very consistent here, and that's very frustrating to the public in general. So if there was some kind of conversation that DOT was having with the railroad, that would be super helpful. What I learned from the commissioner's liaison is that, who's also the legislative aide, is that there's a lot of frustration within the legislature toward the railroad and their aggressiveness in asserting their rights of way in the last 8 to 10 years when they haven't done so for decades. So, I think that's, what we're kind of on the receiving end of that policy right now. So that's one observation. The second one is that I would just like to know.
So I have to cut you short. Sorry, Carrie.
Okay.
Can 3 minutes is up. Finish the sentence. Finish the sentence.
All right. My sentence is, I would like to know how this is weighed within the DOT. I mean, if this is an AMATS DOT project, like who's actually making the decisions about the preferred alternative? Because we've heard Marathon say they want the alternative that's on La Honda, and that's like basically a dead in the water project. So how is the preferred alternative going to be selected?
Sean, is it appropriate for us to?
I appreciate
comments, or is it
the
appropriate for us
extension
to-
there.
I think, yeah, we can speak to that. It's not question and answer really, but the railroad is independent, and I like the railroad. So, but,
Well, it's not about liking or disliking.
and standards exist for a reason, and I can't speak to the standard that's keeping us that far off the track, but it could be that standards change through years too, based on different things that happen to, it's whether it's to keep people safer or what have you. So I can't really speak to that. But anyway, did you have?
Well, I was going to make maybe a similar point. The railroad has been engaged consistently through the process. We've had 2 meetings with them this week. I think they've been great partners on the project, so appreciate their involvement. And I think the second point is Marathon has clarified they are not insisting on the S3 alternative. So they're comfortable with the S2 alternative as long as their other concerns are being met, which they're confident they are going to be met. So that's not an accurate statement of Marathon's position.
Good.
Thank you.
They've changed. That's good.
Please.
Hi, I'm Diana Rhodes with Anchorage Park Foundation, and we support the preferred alternative and have supported the project for a long time. And I'm just really grateful for this meeting. Very helpful. So thank you to everyone for calling this meeting and allowing these issues to be brought up and answer some of our questions about the legal concerns and answer some of our questions about Marathon, and just really grateful to be able to have this so quickly too, because there was just a lot of swirling worries about the trail moving forward. And we do agree, this is the most popular trail right now, for sure. And then we're really excited about future trails that are in the tip. And as I mentioned last time, it just takes so long to get them into the tip and to have that fear that they might be stopped and, you know, not understand why. So really appreciate this meeting. Thank you so very much. And for anyone who's here in the room or is listening online, you can sign a petition and support at anchorageparkfoundation.org.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please.
Hi, David White, retired from Alaska Pipeline Service Company, 41 years in the energy business, 15 or 18 years on the Park Foundation. I'd like to say I think the work that has been done is rather extensive, community and otherwise. With my energy experience, I think the position that Marathon has taken is absolutely appropriate and can be solved. I'm glad to see that, and I'm hopeful that this project will continue to move forward, and appreciate all the work by all the parties that are looking at it.
Thank you. Please.
My name is Mike Jens. Little history on me. I go back 79 years and I was born right here. And 79 years later, I'm still here. Also, during that time frame, I worked on 2 different pipeline projects, one in the lower 48 and the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, the same one David is president of. I was the superintendent on the Northern District. But during that same time frame, I've ridden a bicycle on many trails, including all the trails in Anchorage. And I'm a big fan of trying to extend this trail, Fish Creek Trail, in the manner that we've been looking at here. I really kind of focused on one concern, which is how do you get around the valve and the pipeline that's out there? Most of the pipeline is going to be buried, and you're going to be building a trail on top of the pipeline, which presents very little risk. The main concern was how do you get around the valve, and the picture you saw just a while ago shows you how to get around the valve, and it requires just a small amount of private property to be obtained to be able to do that. So I think we've got a winner of a project here. I just hope we can move ahead and make this happen in the plan that's in place right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jens. Anybody else?
So John Isaacs, attorney community council on the board of directors and co-chair of the land use committee. We've been heavily engaged in this project. We passed a resolution in 2016 supporting the trail and concept. We passed a resolution in 2022 supporting the trail with some conditions we'd like to have addressed, and had a number of field visits and a presentation for our land use committee. As far as the concerns we had, the first one was a preference to use as much of the AWW road as possible for the trail, but understanding the railroad has recommended that 50 feet is one of their concerns, and we understand that that's probably off the table. Some of the new information that's been presented on property has been helpful, will help clarify our deliberations. And that was one of our second major concerns. The third one is the sort of extension of the trail and the moving the trail out into the wetlands on the north end. And while we heard that was in play, it's relatively new information with really relatively little information other than sort of a line on the map. And it would be helpful for us, we would have questions just finalizing what sort of the trail location and the retaining wall is on the south end. And then we would have some questions about really wanting to see some more detail about the proposal on the north end. Part of the problem with the DOT categorical exclusion process is that you guys make decisions, which have gone on for a long time, and let's put it out as a done deal. At the same time, you indicate there's a possibility for some tweaks as you move through the construction process. We just hope that that will be a chance, because we might have some additional comments and recommendations that might be helpful for a better trail location. So just some observations.
Thank you, Mr. Isaacs.
My name is Justin Terrio, just a resident in Turnagain. And just through my work, I know that we here in Anchorage, we like to say that we have a world-class trail system. And that's only possible because we continue to add to this. I have the benefit of being able to see a lot of other cities that are relatively same size to Anchorage, and they're catching up to us. A lot of other cities recognize the need for non-motorized pathways and the quality of life that they bring to their residents. And if Anchorage is going to continue to compete with these other cities up and down the West Coast, the middle of the US, the flyover states, we need to continue to try to invest in these kind of projects. I think with a lot of the rumors that were swirling around and the property owners' concerns, there was also a discussion with knowing that this trail has such limited space to work with the S1, the S2, and the S3 alternatives. The concern was that perhaps these property owners were using some of their influence to try to advocate for Marathon to bring up these concerns and say, well, the S1, the S2 just aren't viable. And I appreciate the efforts that have been done by Marathon, by the assembly members with the resolution that was passed on the 17th, and by just the continued presence of my elected officials, Representative Hall in the room, and other members of office that have really been paying attention to this. I think that the concern was that if the preferred alternative isn't selected, as it was stated by Ms. Karen, I believe, that S3 is really just another way to potentially kill the project. I think that there's kind of a bad faith argument being made on a couple of my neighbors' behalf, saying that they just want a different alternative. I think that they know that if their legal means are drying up to try to fight the project, perhaps by adding enough parasitic drag to the project and trying to advocate for this other alternative that is really a non-starter, is just another way to try to kill it. Just a huge advocate for the trails, love the connection up to the coastal trail. I'm a frequent user of the Fish Creek Trail that already exists right now at the southern end of Barber Street, and just really want to see us continue to grow as a city and maintain our status as a world-class city for non-motorized users. And that's only done through these kinds of projects, whether it's the downtown connection project along the coastal trail here or the Fish Creek Trail connection project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Terrio. And I don't know, I mean,
Yeah,
go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, appreciate your positive comments. I think we do want to be careful not to be speculating about individuals' intentions and not making sort of statements about other individuals as sort of Robert's rules wise, directing to the chair to the degree possible.
A similar comment to the conversations.
Point of order, I'm going to chime in there. I don't think that the public is bound to Robert's rules. They are bound to our sort of the way that we're operating our meetings, time, place, and manner. However, there's also First Amendment issues at play.
Okay.
And so I think we need to respect the right of the public to voice their opinions, given their First Amendment rights.
Yeah, conversations, I would say similar to what Graham said, that conversations I have with my staff is that my staff's not going to speculate. Of course, they speculate, it's human nature, but we can address the things that the concerns that we hear and mitigate where we can. We have to do something with the agenda if we're 10 minutes to 3.
It is 2:50. If we want to continue with public testimony and get to the protected bike lane, we might need to extend the meeting if people are available.
Do we have the ability to stay in the room?
I'm not sure today if we have the ability.
I'm going to check for you. I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Well, we'll
We can
continue
keep
on
going
until we, yeah. Okay. Are there any other comments? Leslie? Lindsay, sorry.
Yeah, I'm Lindsay Hyduk, the Director of Community Engagement, Neighborhood Alaska, and also going to be for our Community Council Land Use and Transportation Committee. And just wanted to, again, appreciate the conversation to help clarify a lot of the questions we've had in supporting this trail connection and the amount of time and energy that has gone into this. And appreciate the Assembly bringing forward a resolution in a quick way to reaffirm the public support and hear everybody's connection to this. I just wanted to focus in on this trail system is also an important piece of as we continue to connect and make a more safer connected network for people to walk, bike, roll throughout our community. And in a year when we've had so many fatalities, it just reaffirms why these connections are so essential. And I just want to make sure that it's part of that bigger picture conversation. And I think in having the pause and not being clear about what that is or what that means or what is being done behind the scenes,
that's a big question that we as community members working with our neighbors aren't able to communicate unless we're at these like midday meetings. And so if we could have a clear statement like Ms. Weiser spoke to earlier, I think that would be really helpful from the project team, from the departments. It came at a point where, as Ms. Ellis has said, we're coalescing and advocating around the bond package and have this urgency and timeline and the uncertainty that factors in and sucks a lot of the public energy into it. It has a cost, I guess I would say. And so I want to recognize that a lot of the issues and concerns are really important and valid and can be addressed in the process, and that's why it exists. And so I just want to really kind of re-elevate the need for this project isn't just that it's fun and great, but that it's really essential for our community to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody online? Or maybe we should deal with the agenda first. Or hear a motion to extend, or can we?
Are you gonna have anything for B? No. So I don't think we're gonna have anything for B.
Okay.
6B, so we'll just be on to 6C. I don't know how long the protected bike lane anticipated to take.
How long do you need, Colin?
7 minutes.
So that we have no real time for questions or anything like that. It's up to you guys.
Move to extend by 15 minutes.
Sure, I might duck out early if I have to, but
Okay.
it's information only. So happy holidays in advance.
So second.
Okay, anybody opposed? So we'll extend to 3:15. You ready, Paul?
Are you done with the?
Well, I think we closed that. We didn't have anybody online, right?
No, nobody was
Okay.
raising their hand. I agree.
I will aspire to be as efficient with your time as possible. While she's pulling that up, my name is Colin Singleton with CRW Engineering Group, and I'm leading the consultant team on the Anchorage Protected Bike Lane Pilot Study Project. We are wrapping up the project, and I'd like to present to you our final findings on both phases. This is the third time we've come to both the Technical Advisory Committee and the TC. And so I'd just like to take you through some of those things. So next slide, please. So as you're aware of, this project is a community-led research project that consists of a lot of different players, led by DOT Research Development and Technology Transfer and a collaboration with MOA Traffic. We also had participation from Dr. Boland on the Anchorage Assembly and from Bike Anchorage embedded in our project team. Leading the consultant side of things, CRW was leading the charge with Kittleson and Huddle in support. So next slide, please. As I went over in our previous presentations to AMATS, we had two phases, one on Pine Street and McCary Street in September 2023, and one on 6th Avenue and A Street throughout the summer of 2024. Next slide, please. A little bit of the extents of that Pine McCary project that went from DeBar Road to Mountain View Drive. And essentially, next slide, please. This is the extents of that second phase on 6th Avenue from Coastal Place to A Street, and on A Street from 10th Avenue, or from 6th Avenue to 10th Avenue, and extending even a little south there. A little bit of what it looked like. This next slide. You can see the before condition at the top on Pine Street, where there was a buffered bike lane in between the travel lane and the parking lane on the east. And then during the pilot, we swapped that parking lane and bicycle lane to have a parking protected bike lane using temporary materials, curbs, post, signage. And it looked a little bit rough, I'll admit, but we were able to take those findings and incorporate it into the next phase, phase 2 on A Street and 6th Avenue. Here's a picture of the before, a screen grab from Google showing cyclists using the sidewalk and in the lane on A Street. And then in the photo below, using temporary materials such as different types of posts, temporary striping, temporary markings, and if you really have great eyesight, you can see temporary bike signals there utilized for that. So I'll zip on through here to the next slide. The pilot consisted of essentially 4 steps following our design and planning. That was installation, experiencing it, collecting data, both traffic data and input from the community, and then removing the project. As you can see, the final photo, it was successfully removed and returned back to its previous conditions. The focus of our finding is trying to answer some key questions. The first was, are temporary materials effective for pilots on roads? And I think we can definitively say, yes, they can be. Maybe our start here in some of these photos showed a lot of lessons learned from the first phase. But if we go to the next, we can say next slide. You can see we were able to do this in what I would say is a high quality way, where we were comfortable having cyclists on the road using these facilities in a controlled traffic environment, and the public and other businesses operating and driving around those. So I say, yes, we definitely can use these materials going forward. We learned a lot about how they can successfully be implemented, maintained in a cost-effective way. So next slide. An important question was, did the protected bike lane reduce vehicle speeds? While this is not necessarily the number one question for the focus of the study, it's a very important one for the drivers that are affected. And on Pine Street and McCary Street, we definitely saw a correcting of traffic violation. So the number of people that broke the speed limit, the excessive speeders, were decreased significantly on Pine Street, McCary Street, where the road is wider than it needs to be. But on the next slide, answering this question for 6th Avenue and A Street, we saw both an initial decrease in speed and then a slight increase in speed later on in the pilot. So that's indicative that the project can have a traffic calming effect, but it also doesn't break the system. I think that's an important takeaway. Our final reporting will go into a lot more detail on this. I know you probably can't even see what's written up there, but that's the main takeaway, is that we didn't break the system. As illustrated in this next slide, that shows speed from a different vantage point of travel time. So we studied the travel time along these corridors during the pilot and after. As you can see, during is in the green line, yellow is after. And basically we found on average per hour, there was a 40 to 50 second delay on those 2 corridors. Some will say, that's a doubling on A Street for the corridor that we looked at, but doubling 40 seconds, you can slice it how you want, but not a significant increase in traffic. That basically amounts to people hitting one signal cycle, missing it, and then getting through on the next cycle. So we didn't break the system, is the quick answer. And we didn't observe large deviation of truck traffic or passenger cars from those corridors to other routes. There's a lot of volatility in the data, but no clear, consistent pattern of that shift. Next slide, please. This is one of the most common questions that we got about the project, was how many people use the PBL? And in the numerous press coverage that we had, this was the focus of a lot of criticism, trying to identify a threshold that the project didn't meet that would have shown that the project did not have, it wasn't worthwhile because it hadn't met a certain threshold of cyclists. What we found that in general, 100 to 130 cyclists were using the corridor every day. That amounts to essentially during daylight hours, a cyclist every 7 minutes. And so it's the experience of a driver who's in a queue and sees no one in the bicycle lane is backed up by the data, but that's not necessarily the whole picture. That number of cyclists is a 2 to 4-fold increase from what we had before, and a big deal, I'd say, in a downtown environment where cyclists are not legally allowed to be on the sidewalk. I'll keep going here. Next slide, please. I'll skip this. Was the PBL inherently dangerous? There wasn't a very strong crash pattern on 6th Avenue and A Street or on Pine Street and Carey Street before the corridor. And what we found was, while there was one crash on 9th Avenue and A Street, that was a red light running vehicle who hit a cyclist and did not injure them. That we didn't find a statistical pattern of an increase in crashes along the corridor, neither for vehicles or for pedestrians. But in one specific pattern on this next slide, you can see a way that we addressed a crash pattern that was existing, a known crash pattern of red light running on C Street, that the public, seeing the southwest corner of 6th and C, a damaged building that had been repeatedly hit, and pointed that out to us and said, this is a major concern that the project needs to consider before putting a protected bike lane through. And this is illustrative of two things. One, the project's sensitivity to what the public said, listening to those comments and looking for ways that we could take action. And two, the way in which a pilot can be used to study different ways to affect traffic safety. So in the 42 months before the pilot, 30 southbound red light running collisions occurred. And during the pilot, we would expect about one a month, and we saw 0 after we used even something as simple as flex posts to close the southbound left turn lane on C Street. That's not saying that's the solution. It's just pointing that pilots can be used to study things and look for solutions before we start moving curve. Next slide, please. People is a huge piece of this, and I'll just go into a few highlights. Next slide. I'm going to say something two ways. One, we had over 1,400 interactions with the public on this second phase. That included pre-install survey responses, post-install survey responses, 700 of those, and then written comments. If you have great eyesight, you can see that 57% of the written comments that we received were negative, and we go into detail about their concerns in our reporting. But what I'll say is, instead of looking at that as a reason why the project was not successful, I think that's an indication of how well pilots can be used to get public participation. One of the most popular trail projects in town, Fish Creek Trails, we heard there were 200 comments. We're talking about 1,400 interactions. That's a pretty big deal. I'll also note, look at the number of the percentage of drivers. We had 70% of drivers participate in our surveys. So we collected their input. We collected what they were opposed to. And those are things that government officials thinking about future temporary and permanent projects would be well to take stock of. I'll note that 20% of our respondents were from Eagle River and the Valley, and we were able in our reporting to break out responses by mode and by location. So it's of great value as we're thinking about things that have value locally and regionally. Next slide, please. In terms of measuring how it affects cyclist comfort, two pieces of context are to think about how comfortable people are riding in Anchorage in general. As you can see on the lower graph, 50% of people are either very comfortable or comfortable cycling in Anchorage in general. That's all the respondents that we had. And then if we look at downtown, only 24% of people are comfortable cycling in roadways downtown. That's saying people are not feeling safe about it. That illustrates the purpose and need of why we looked at downtown with our study. The next slide. I'll skip over this. The next slide doesn't show exactly what I wanted, but if we ask that same question of how comfortable cyclists were in the PBL, 86% were either strongly agreed they were comfortable or agreed they were comfortable. And then pedestrians, 56% were comfortable walking next to the protected bike lane. If we look at how it influenced people, 70% said it influenced their decision to ride the corridor today and the day of the survey. And then over 70% said that they strongly agreed that they would cycle in a protected bike lane more often. Next slide. This doesn't illustrate everyone's attitudes though. And we had competing narratives. When we surveyed business owners in downtown, even though we had a small sample of those, we found a lot of negative reactions to the protected bike lane. There were a majority of business owners surveyed didn't agree that the PBL was good for business. And I just say that it's important for government officials going forward to ensure good communication with business owners and their concerns are addressed in any future project. I will note that there were more cyclists who said that the purpose of their trip to downtown was shopping and dining, who said that they went to downtown using the PBL more often than business owners who responded to our survey. So that provides some context of how that stacks up. Next thing.
You've blown your 7 minutes by quite a bit, but.
Okay, I'm going to this keep going, one more slide. Some next steps. The takeaway is not that we're not proposing to build a permanent project on 6th Avenue and A Street. It never was. But some of the project outcomes, great information for agencies thinking about future temporary and permanent projects. Winter pilot is likely the suggested next step, which would most likely take place we'd recommend for 2026 to 2027. And then I know that agencies are currently exploring how temporary materials can be used on other types of projects, other pilots that are not specifically bike projects. So those are things coming out. The consensus between drivers and cyclists was that there's interest in putting more focus on low speed, low traffic corridors. And that is one of the reasons why MOA Traffic is currently working on the Neighborhood Greenways project. So those are some of the outcomes. Our reporting is in draft right now and is being reviewed and will be finalized this month and before the end of the year. So thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, appreciate your passion. I look forward to the report. But anybody on the committee have questions or comments for Colin?
I'll just say it was a really fun project to be part of, and thank you to all who are involved. And I'm glad that we have some good takeaways. And now I can say to all those people, nobody was using it. Well, actually, some people did. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, as a bicyclist who comes here, which is adjacent to the bike lane, I didn't actually use it that much. And I think the reason is it wasn't embedded in the network of routes that connected my house to here. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited that traffic is moving in the direction of the neighborhood greenways as a lesson learned for this. Sort of it's, creating more of that thickened network of connectivity of lower stress streets where we can use some of these quick build, cheap solutions to create immediate safety results feels really exciting, especially in a universe where for AMATS projects, we're looking at like many years of headway of process and design before we even get to years of construction and right-of-way acquisition and all those pieces. So it feels like this is a really exciting direction for us to be moving in terms of delivering safety projects faster and in ways that generate more meaningful public feedback than a 2.5-hour meeting where we just talk at you all for a while. So very excited about direction. Thanks, Colin, and thanks to the rest of the project team. And to DOD for, helping make it happen too.
Yeah.
Credit where credit is due.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, it's I guess the difference of opinion, I guess the diversity that we have in Anchorage is part of the charm, right? So on the day that we pulled it out, I got 2 emails. One said, hey, this was great. You guys need to make this a permanent facility. The other email said, you should be fired for ever putting that in place. So thank you.
Could you go to the next slide too, just so people have contact info and shout out, obviously, the DOT and MOA contacts, Anna Boson, who was on the line previously, and Brad Coy, the municipal traffic engineer.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the public?
Dustin Terry, again, build more of it. Build more of it all over the city. Paint the entire street.
Big notes.
And I'm Lindsay Heide. I just also want to thank the department and the city I think the coordination to make that happen was really exciting to see and might be one of the best outcomes of the project. Being an advocate for almost 15 years in this town, I didn't think something like that could be possible without the leadership that we have now. So just really appreciate everybody who made it happen.
Excellent. Anybody else? We're on to any committee comments in general. I'm not hearing any general comments from the public. Not seeing any. I get an motion to adjourn. So moved.
Seconded.
Anybody opposed? We're adjourned at 3:12. Thank you all.
Thank you.